Chau, an American missionary.
And they really want to preserve their isolation from
We are making contact
military
with the Sentinelese, a small indigenous tribe.
What's happening on
No
North Sentinel
attacking
Island?
outsiders.
Indian authorities should abandon efforts to retrieve the body of an American missionary believed.
A primitive tribe that has lived isolated from the outside world for centuries, including in our current century, the 21st century. North Sentinel Island is home to this tribe. In this video, we explore the mysteries of the island and some of the tragic events that have taken place. Sit back and let's start exploring. Enjoy the show. North Sentinel Island is one of the most interesting and mysterious places in the world. Part of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, located about 1126 miles from India. It is approximately 31 miles from the nearest large island, Port Blair, the capital of the Andaman Islands. It is also 39.5 miles from its counterpart, the South Sentinel Islands. Covered by dense tropical forest, North Sentinel Island has a surface area of approximately 23.04 square miles. The island is surrounded by coral reefs and has no natural harbors. North Sentinel Island was named after the tribes that lived there, most likely by Western explorers who mapped the area in the 18th and 19th centuries. However, there is no exact evidence as to who gave the name or on what date. The Sentinel tribe, the people of the island, are thought to have arrived about 60,000 years ago with the wave of people migrating from Africa to Asia and have remained isolated on this island ever since. Their population is estimated to be only between 50 and 400 people. It is difficult to provide an exact figure because life on the island is closed to the outside world, making it impossible to keep a constant eye on the population. The Sentinel people live a life in touch with nature by hunting, using traditional methods. To keep the people on the island safe, the Indian government has declared the island a restricted area and banned outside interventions. It is forbidden to come within 3 miles, 5 kilometers of the island. The reason for this is to protect the Sentinel people from the negative effects of cultural differences and possible diseases from the outside world. The origin of the people is estimated by scientists to be the result of a migration 60,000 years ago. Although this is not definitive information, if we stick to this theory, it shows that the Sentinel people are representatives of one of the oldest migrations of humanity. Here is some information about the discovery of the Sentinel people. The first recorded encounter occurred in 1771 when John Ritchie, a British explorer representing the East India Company, one of the several trading companies that emerged after the geographical discoveries, accidentally noted seeing lights from Sentinel Island while passing by its shore. However, this was not clear evidence that a people lived there. The first recorded mention of North Sentinel Island by the modern world came in 1867. The captain of the Nineveh, a merchant ship sailing from India to Myanmar via the Bay of Bengal, an important route for merchant ships in the colonial administration at the time, was unaware that he would come across the Sentinel tribe. The purpose of the ship was to transport commercial goods from India to Southeast Asia. While sailing in the Bay of Bengal, the Nineveh was caught in a violent storm that caused the ship to drift off course and into the coral reefs of North Sentinel Island, the home of the tribe who, coincidentally, had never seen a human being except themselves before. The ship ran aground near the shore of the island. After the accident, the crew had to go ashore on an island they had never seen before and knew nothing about. They were unaware of both the island and the Sentinel people living there. It was noted that the crew encountered the Sentinel people shortly after they went ashore. Of course, they made a note of encountering a tribe, not specifically identifying them as the Sentinel people. The Sentinel people, who had never encountered foreigners before, saw the incoming people as a threat and took action. They attacked the crew with arrows and spears. Observers noted that the people tried to drive the strangers away from the shore with a natural and primitive defense method. The Sentinel tribe made it clear that they would never allow any outsiders to set foot on their island. The survivors were then forced to remain on the island in a defensive state for a long time. Fortunately, they were rescued a few days later by a British Navy ship. This event led to the entry of North Sentinel Island into modern records, and the isolated way of life of the Sentinel people was recognized. From then on, the island became particularly notable for its aggressive attitude towards the outside world. Maurice Vidal Portman, a British officer and anthropologist, was a representative of the British colonial administration in the Andaman Islands. Portman organized several expeditions to North Sentinel Island in the 1880s to study and introduce the Sentinelese people to the outside world. Portman's main task in these expeditions was to document the way of life, culture, and language of the indigenous peoples, and to make them compatible with the colonial administration. But was Portman able to achieve this? On Portman's first expedition, he saw naked tribesmen shooting arrows towards him as he passed by the shore. After this, he began to research the island in depth, but this was to become an obsession. After a while, he entered the island with a small team of soldiers and other helpers, and they were friendly to the locals and even took pictures with them. Then, Portman's obsession with the island increased even more, and he made his second trip to the island. But this trip would not be like the previous one. On this visit, Portman kidnapped 2 old adults and 4 children, and quickly escaped from the island. The elderly couple and the children were taken to Port Blair, the capital of the Andaman Islands, which we mentioned earlier. However, the couple soon became seriously ill because they were not used to the viruses in the outside world. Although British doctors intervened, they were not successful, and the elderly couple soon died. After the couple's death, Portman organized a second visit and brought the children back to the island with gifts. Although the return of the children partially calmed the Sentinelese people, it increased their distrust of the outside world. After this, the islanders became even more defensive and aggressive towards the outside world. Portman halted his ventures to North Sentinel Island after all this. He decided that the isolated nature of the Sentinel people should not be disturbed. Some 80 years later, a number of teams have provided assistance to North Sentinel Island. Only one of these attempts was successful. They gave the natives food such as coconuts, although the natives cautiously accepted the gifts. And after that, they never showed this peaceful behavior again. It was then forbidden to approach the island. In 1981, a cargo ship carrying a crew of 50 people ran aground on the shore of North Sentinel Island. The next morning, the ship's crew encountered Sentinel natives carrying arrows and spears. This was the first major shipwreck to come to the island from outside. After calls for help, helicopters arrived, and the crew was rescued. But that shipwreck became an important find for the islanders. It is not known exactly what the locals did with the wreckage, but estimates suggest that they may have made great technological progress with the materials they obtained from the wreckage. In particular, they are thought to have used pieces of iron from the ship to make the tips of their arrows. This may have been a step that would have allowed them to move from the Stone Age to the Iron Age. In 2004, after a massive earthquake in the Indian Ocean, the locals who were flooded by the tsunami somehow managed to survive. 3 days after the tsunami, the islanders attacked an Indian Navy plane carrying food and trying to bring aid to the island with arrows and spears. Another tragic incident is as follows. On January 26, 2006, 2 fishermen who came to the island to fish illegally were killed by Sentinels when their boat docked on the island. The Sentinels threw the bodies of the fishermen into pits on the beach and attacked the helicopter that came to pick them up. The event that made the island famous all over the world was a recent incident, was a tragedy. What happened to a missionary? John Allen Chau was born in 1991 in the American state of Alabama. His mother, Linda Adams Chau, served in the Christian student organization Chi Alpha, while his father, Patrick Chau, was a psychiatrist who had left China during the Cultural Revolution. Sometime later, the family moved from Alabama to Vancouver, Washington, where John attended Vancouver Christian High School. From a young age, John combined a deep faith with an interest in religious mission and adventure. He was inspired by explorers and missionaries such as David Livingstone and Bruce Olson. It was later in his school life that John first read about North Sentinel Island in the Joshua Project database. So, the inhabitants of North Sentinel Island, who know nothing of the outside world. And he was obsessed with the existence of a creator on earth, heaven, and he wanted to make sure that there was no one who did not know about the reality of hell. He felt that he had to tell the natives, who had lived in isolation on this island for thousands of years, about Jesus Christ and introduce them to his faith, Christianity. He saw North Sentinel Island, which had not been introduced to Christianity, as the last stronghold of the devil. But he realized that this was no easy task. He believed in himself and decided to make a plan that would last for many years. It was time to implement his plan. His goal was clear: to reach North Sentinel Island in southeastern India, 7,500 miles or 12,000 kilometers away from his home country. First, he left his full-time job and then started to prepare himself by taking outdoor leadership courses. He trained as an emergency medical technician and tried to keep fit by doing sports. He did all of this to prepare for whatever might happen to him on North Sentinel Island. He spent 3 summers in the US working as a caretaker and emergency nurse, working alone in a small cabin, and continued his life on his own. In 2017, he joined the missionary organization All Nations. Here, he received extensive training in linguistics, cultural anthropology, and wilderness survival. This training camp included a specially created mock village, and there were fake natives living there. During the training, the natives would fake attacks with their spears. This was important for him to feel ready. By October 2018, John Allen Chau took an important step to reach North Sentinel Island. First, he received 13 different vaccinations to avoid carrying any diseases to the island. For some reason, John felt an indescribable love for the Sentinel tribe. He wrote in his diary that he took these vaccinations so as not to risk the health of the Sentinel people, who were isolated and protected from the outside world. He then flew from America to India and settled in Port Blair, the closest town to North Sentinel Island. But before he started to visit the island, he chose to quarantine at home for 2 weeks. During this time, he was careful not to come into contact with anyone. This was not only to avoid the risk of contracting the disease, but also to have a proper first interaction with the people on the island he would be visiting. John planned all these efforts, keeping in mind the great importance of his upcoming mission. It was the morning hours of November 14th, 2018, when the big day arrived, and the Indian government decided that the North Sentinel, it was strictly forbidden to come within 9 kilometers of the island. So John decided to get help from local fishermen to reach the island. John contacted a group of fishermen from Port Blair and offered them to help him in exchange for money. He offered the fishermen 25,000 Indian rupees. At the current exchange rate, that's about $288. The fishermen accepted the offer, and agreed to take John close to the island, but only if he did not enter the island. When night fell, he and the fisherman to whom he had delivered the money secretly set off for North Sentinel Island. As they approached the shore, the fishermen refused to move forward, and they said they were going back to Port Blair. After that, John was going to jump into a boat. He himself had to be naked so that the natives would not feel out of place. John, thinking that he had to confront them, took off his clothes and got into the boat. He got on. After getting a little closer, he soon saw yellow faces through the trees. A few Indians came out, painted. John shouted from inside the boat, "My name is John. I love you." As he did so, one of the natives shot an arrow, and it hit John's Bible. And with the impact of the jolt, John fell overboard, and the natives tried to seize him boat. John, with great courage, had to swim 1.5 kilometers back to his ship, but he had no intention of giving up. He planned to keep going, even if he had to turn back. "I am scared," he wrote in his diary that night. Another remarkable passage in his diary included a prayer. "If I am killed by the natives, please forgive them, God." After spending the night on the ship, John began his new attempt the next morning. But after that, John was never heard from again. Returning back, the fisherman was arrested and sent to prison. In the fisherman's statement, John was dragged by a rope tied to his feet by the natives on the island. That he was a witness. John is presumed dead. However, it is speculated that the locals may have buried the body according to their customs. However, the Indian government and authorities did not take the body for certain and refrained from intervening on the island because there was strong resistance to outside intervention. As a result, the body is not considered lost, but buried by the locals. Following this tragic event in 2018, the Indian government has taken stricter measures to protect the island's indigenous population and prevent outside threats. And it is known that the travel ban to the island is still in effect today. North Sentinel Island remains one of the most mysterious places in the world. Only the Sentinels, and perhaps John, knew what lay behind the incredibly dense trees. If you want to discover the shadow side of the world, subscribe to the Cyrox Videos channel and join our mystery-filled stories. I'm your Captain Cyrox, and we've come to the end of this adventure. Thank you for watching. Remember, there are countless mysteries tucked away in a dark part of the world, waiting to be revealed.
Chau, an American missionary,
And they really want to preserve their isolation from the
illegally making
outside world.
contact with the Sentinelese, a small indigenous tribe.
What's happening on North Sentinel Island?
Indian authorities should abandon efforts to retrieve the body of an American missionary.